Hey everybody, my name is Robert Emmons Jr. and I'm the organizing consultant with One Aim Illinois. It's my pleasure to be able to help organize the state's largest coalition of gun violence prevention and community violence intervention organizations. We represent about 225 plus organizations across the state of Illinois, all working to end gun violence. If you're a part of this call, please go. And you haven't joined our coalition, please go to our website. We'll drop in a link. So join our coalition where our strength is solely in the coalition strength. So we implore you to join our coalition, stay up to date with all of the things that we're working on. We just had some huge wins, both in the Illinois General Assembly and just educating the public on gun violence prevention and community violence intervention. Uh, uh, Things we're working on, not just here in Illinois, but across the state. We're going to be joined today for our special June coalition meeting by the VPC. Yolanda will talk a little bit more about that, but we're super excited to get started. It's going to be a good one. And with that being said, would love to introduce our fearless, amazing executive director, Yolanda Androzzo.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Robert, for that fabulous introduction. I could say the same for you. Yes, you are both fearless and amazing and nonstop. I'll add that. Once again, yes, thank you. My name is Yolanda Androzzo, and I am the executive director of One Aim Illinois. Thank you to June's coalition meeting. And as we all know, June is Gun Violence Awareness Month, where we honor not only those who those victims of gun violence, their memory, but also those survivors. We want to keep gun violence in the spotlight year round, of course, but June has been designated as the month that we pay special attention to it. Of course, at One Aim, we pay attention to it at all times. I would like to thank everybody for joining us at Advocacy Day on May 20th. We really, we made a difference because not long after that, we passed SB 8, that is Safe at Home, and it's on its way to the governor's desk to be signed. So give yourselves a round of applause. I definitely give you a round of applause. All the survivors and advocates who joined us for Advocacy Day, your voice, your perspectives, your energy, your advocacy matters. And I'd also like to thank those who have been participating in events really, throughout June. Strides for Peace, the Race Against Gun Violence event that we were part of. Thanks to other coalition members who came down and joined us for that, as well as Hadia's Party for Peace that the Pendleton family puts on. So many of you came out for that. So thank you for your advocacy. And we just held a press conference actually on June 6th in honor of Gun Violence Awareness Month. And also to get the word out on our joint gun death in Illinois report. That's a joint report with the Violence Policy Center. And we had legislators and advocates and survivors speak out. We were joined by Representative Hirschauer, Cook County Clerk Gordon, Cleopatra Pendleton, Sherry Nolen, and Josh Sugarmann, who is the executive director of the Violence Policy Center, who is now with us on this call, along with Tara Weiss, who is the public analyst, one of them for the Violence Policy Center. Thank you. I thank you so much for joining us for this coalition call, where we will be going over the Gun Death in Illinois report for 2025. So Josh, would you like to come on? Both of you can come on, and if you'd like to say a few words, Josh Sugarmann.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. As Yolanda mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Violence Policy Center. Those who don't know us, we're a national educational organization based in Washington, D.C. We're a gun violence prevention group. And a lot of the work that we do focuses on public health research and the impact of gun violence across the nation and how gun violence affects all of us, but in different ways. And for example, we do studies on Black homicide victimization state by state, women killed by men, once again, state by state, Latino victimization. And out of these studies, we started a series of new state-based studies. And the first partner we worked with was One Aim Illinois. And this is now the third year that we've been doing gun death in Illinois. And we really appreciate the partnership with One Aim and their coalition partners. And of course, we always hope the work that we do is useful to you. One reason we do this study, we do our research, is that we believe effective public policy is actually built on reliable and comprehensive data. And the goal of the study is to supply one more tool to advocates, policymakers, and organizations as they work to reduce gun violence for a safer Illinois. Another issue is that the study contains profiles of One AIM Illinois members of their Survivors Council, because when you look at numbers all the time, sometimes you lose perspective. That each of these deaths, each of these numbers, each of these statistics represents a person, a family, a community impacted by gun violence. And that's one of the key elements we want to make sure we never lose sight of in our research. So I'll leave it with that. I will pass the baton over to our public health analyst, Tara Weens, to talk about the study.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tara Weens, and I'm the Violence Policy Center's public health analyst. I am here today to sort of go through the findings of the report. The report is currently available online, and I see that folks have been dropping various web pages in the chat, so feel free to take a look at the report while I'm presenting. And I'm happy to answer questions while I'm presenting. I think that Robert has agreed to sort of read questions as they're coming in, so please drop your questions in the chat, and I'm happy to sort of pause and answer the questions as they come in. Are we ready to jump into it? Great, let me share my screen. Okay, can you let me know that you're seeing the PowerPoint in presentation mode? Awesome, I saw a thumbs up, thank you. So just a quick overview of the presentation today. I want to sort of set the stage and provide some context about what firearm death looks like in Illinois broadly. Then we'll dive into homicide deaths, suicide deaths. We're going to look at ATF data for firearms that are recovered in Illinois. And then summarize findings at the end. In 2023, guns claimed the lives of 1,691 Illinois residents in firearm deaths. Among these deaths, there were 962 firearm homicides, 688 firearm suicides, and 13 unintentional firearm deaths. Firearms were used, not surprisingly, in the vast majority of all homicides in the state in 2023. They were used in 82% of all homicides. And firearms were used in 44% of all suicides in the state that year. I should mention that the data for this report come from publicly available CDC mortality data. So we are using 2023 data because it's the most recently available and comprehensive data. More recent data are available on the CDC website. However, they haven't been finalized yet. And so we really appreciate just being able to use sort of like a finalized, complete mortality data set from CDC. So all of the data in this report are 2023. So rates of firearm deaths in Illinois outpace motor vehicle deaths. On this graph, the light blue line shows rates of motor vehicle deaths in the state over the last 2 decades, and then the dark blue line is showing deaths by firearms in Illinois. So you can see that since 2014, gun deaths have outpaced motor vehicle deaths. This is particularly shocking when you think about a person's daily exposure to motor vehicles as opposed to firearms. So the fact that firearm deaths are outpacing motor vehicle deaths is pretty shocking. This slide shows the rates of firearm deaths in Illinois, specifically firearm homicide deaths. You can see that they've been increasing over the last decade. Death rates more than doubled between 2013 and 2021, from 4.5 to 10.7 per 100,000. This increase in firearm violence is consistent with national trends that were seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Rates in Illinois, after peaking in 2021, then they decreased to 8.2 per 100,000 in 2023. However, you'll note that the firearm homicide rate in 2023 is still much higher than it was 20 years ago. So just adding a line on this graph now for firearm suicide rates. Firearm suicide deaths have been slowly increasing in Illinois, reaching the highest that they have been in the last 2 decades in 2023. So rates increased from 2.9 per 100,000 in 2006 to 5.1 per 100,000 in 2023. So one thing that I'd like folks to take away from this slide is that while firearm homicide deaths have decreased in recent years, the opposite is true for firearm suicide deaths. They've been increasing. We're going to take a deeper dive into homicide deaths in Illinois over the next couple of slides. Illinois has a higher homicide and firearm homicide rate compared to national rates. So what you're seeing on this graph are specifically national overall homicide rates depicted in the solid blue line, and the dashed line is showing national firearm homicide rates. You can see that there was that peak during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021 nationally. And then we're going to add the Illinois homicide and firearm homicide rates. So now these are the dark blue solid and the dark blue dashed lines that you can see. So these rates are higher than national rates. And Illinois actually experienced a larger peak in homicide rates in 2021 compared to the national rates. We wanted to take sort of more of a local look at how Illinois compares to other states in the Great Lakes region. So thinking specifically about firearm homicide rates, you'll note that Illinois has the highest firearm homicide rate compared to other states in the Great Lakes region at 9.8 per 100,000, followed by Indiana at 8.0 per 100,000, et cetera. And these are specifically rates for the year 2023. We also wanted to look at how rates compare for young people. So these are firearm homicide rates for people aged 24 and under. Again, you'll note that Illinois leads all the states in the Great Lakes region with a firearm homicide rate of 10.4 per 100,000, again, followed by Indiana at 8.2. The percentage of firearms the percentage of homicides that were committed with firearms has increased pretty drastically over the last 20 years. It increased from 66% in 2004 to 82% in 2023. The percentage of homicides committed with firearms decreased slightly between 2021 and 2023. Over the next couple of slides, we're going to be talking about the racial disparities that are seen with firearm homicide violence in the state.
Sarah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Why is Illinois higher than the national rate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Illinois for the past several years has had higher rates. I think, that is driven by firearm homicide violence. I don't know if Josh wants to add anything to that.
No, I'll just concur with, what you've said. It is firearms homicide that is driving the rate in Illinois. But also, I think you have to keep in mind the percentage of guns coming from out of state into Illinois that helps drive that violence. I would just add that point.
Yeah, so we'll get into sort of where guns are coming from that are recovered in Illinois later in the presentation. So taking a look at this graph, this is showing homicide and firearm homicides among different racial populations in the state. The dark blue lines are showing the Black overall homicide rates and the Black firearm homicide rates. That orange line closer to the bottom depicts the Hispanic overall homicide and firearm homicide rates. And then the yellow lines at the bottom are showing the rates for the white population. So, it's clear from the graph that Black Illinois residents have the highest homicide and firearm homicide rates compared to white and Hispanic Illinois residents. This has been true for the last several years. Hispanic Illinois residents were more than 5 times as likely to die by firearm homicide compared to white residents in 2023. Over the next couple of slides, I've got more information about the disparity between the white and the Black populations in the state. So this first pie chart is showing the percentage of Illinois residents, the Illinois population by race and ethnicity. You can see that the Black population makes up 14% of the state's population. And then we want to show the percentage of all Illinois firearm homicide victims by race and ethnicity. So even though Black residents make up a minority of the state population, they make up 3/4 of the number of firearm homicide victims by race and ethnicity. You can see that white victims make up the smallest sliver of the pie, followed by Hispanic victims and victims of other races, shown in the green sliver there on the right. This slide, just to sort of orient folks, this slide is showing the overall homicide rates among males. We like to disaggregate data by sex, and so this slide is focusing on males. The green bar is showing the overall homicide rate in 2023, and then the blue bar is showing the overall homicide rate for Black Illinois residents. So in 2023, Black males died at much higher rates of homicide and firearm homicide compared to white males. In 2023, they were 32 times more likely to die by homicide compared to white males in the state. And then when we focus specifically on firearm homicides, this disparity gets even larger. So in 2023, Black males in Illinois were more than 50 times more likely to die by firearm homicide compared to white males. The magnitude of these disparities is something that doesn't receive the attention that it deserves or demands. When we're talking about racial disparities in gun violence, I think that people are aware that there are racial disparities, but I think we do really need to quantify the extent of the disparity and, sort of cite these statistics that Black males are 50 times more likely to die by firearm homicide compared to white males in the state. So these disparities are persisting among females in the state as well, although it is to a lesser extent. Black females in Illinois die at much higher rates of homicide and firearm homicide compared to white females. In 2023, Black females depicted by the blue bar were more than 9 times as likely to die by homicide. Black females were 14 times as likely to die by firearm homicide specifically compared to white females. These next couple of graphs are showing something slightly different. Here we're looking at the percentage of homicides that were committed with firearms. Again, this is disaggregated by sex. So the blue bar is showing the percentage of homicides among white males that were committed with a firearm. So just over half of white males killed by homicide were killed with a firearm. This is compared to 89% of Black male homicide victims were killed with a firearm. So Black males are much more likely to be killed with a firearm compared to white males. That's sort of the takeaway from this slide. The pattern is similar when you look at females. So 47% of white female homicide victims were killed with a firearm, and that's compared to 70% of Black female homicide victims who were killed with a firearm in 2023. Now I want to pivot and do a deeper dive into suicide in the state. Different from homicide, Illinois actually has lower suicide and firearm suicide rates compared to national rates. So what you're seeing here is the national overall suicide rate, depicted with light blue, the light blue solid line at the top of the graph. And then the firearm suicide rate nationally is depicted with the dashed blue line. The dark blue lines are now juxtaposing the Illinois overall suicide rates and the Illinois firearm suicide rates. So you can see that the rates both nationally and in Illinois have remained relatively stable over the last couple of years, although we have seen that slight uptick in suicide rates in Illinois recently. Over the last 2 decades, firearms have played an increasing role in suicide in the state. The percentage of suicides by firearm has increased from 34% in 2009 to 44% in 2023. Well, Black males are more likely to die by homicide, as we previously discussed, compared to white males. The opposite pattern is true for suicide. So in 2023, white males in Illinois were more likely to die by suicide compared to Black males. And this trend holds true when you look specifically at firearm suicides, although, again, the disparity between white and Black decreases a little bit. In 2023, white females in Illinois were more likely to die by suicide compared to Black females. And I'm only showing the overall suicide rate here. The number of firearm suicides among Black females is too small to be able to do much calculation with it. We can't calculate a reliable rate because the numbers are too small. So those data are not shown here. Suicides among Black males are more likely to involve a firearm compared to white males. This is similar to what we saw with homicides. 50% of suicides among white males in the state involved a firearm compared to 58% among Black males. And then again, because the number of firearm suicides among Black females is less than 10, I'm not showing this graph for females in the state. So now moving on to data from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. We call it ATF data. These data are showing information about guns that were recovered in the state and also traced to get more information about their origin. So in 2023, most firearms that were recovered in Illinois were handguns. 81% were pistols and 6% were revolvers. This trend is pretty common. This is what we see year after year in ATF data. 51% of firearms that are recovered in Illinois originated in Illinois. And another 22% are coming from other states in the Great Lakes region. So Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. Firearms that are recovered in Illinois are recovered in Chicago. And then the time to crime statistic is, you can see here that from the point of sort of getting the weapon to the weapon actually being recovered and traced in a crime is typically about 3 or more years. So 49% of the firearms that were recovered and traced were first used in a crime reported to law enforcement 3 or more years after the weapon was originally purchased. And then looking at the age of the people who possess the firearm that's recovered and traced, 1/3 of possessors are age 24 or younger. So that's all of the data that I have to show you. Feel free to check out the report. Like I said, it's publicly available online. But just to briefly summarize what we've talked about today, after increasing during the COVID-19 pandemic, firearm homicide rates in Illinois decreased between 2021 and 2023. Rates are still much higher than they were 2 decades ago. Firearm suicide rates have been slowly but steadily increasing. Illinois has higher homicide and firearm homicide rates compared to national rates, and also as compared to other Great Lakes states. We talked extensively about the racial disparities that are present in the state. Hispanic Illinois residents are more than 5 times as likely to die by firearm homicide compared to white residents in the state. Though only 14% of Illinois' population is Black, 3/4 of the state's firearm homicide victims are Black. Black males and females in the state die at much higher rates of both overall homicide and firearm homicide compared to their white counterparts. And then the opposite is true when you think about suicide and firearm suicide, where white males and females are more likely to die by suicide and firearm suicide compared to Black counterparts. The majority of the firearms that are recovered in Illinois and are traced are handguns. Half of the traced firearms originated in Illinois. Half of the firearms that were recovered in Illinois are recovered in Chicago. And most firearms recovered in Illinois are not recovered until 3 or more years after the weapon was originally purchased. And 1/3 of those who possess the recovered firearms are age 24 and younger. So I'm happy to take any more questions if there are any in the chat. If you want to check out other publications that the VPC authors, there's a link here to be able to do that.
Yeah, Tara, we have a couple questions in the chat.
Great.
Question from Jim McGrath. Has the percentage of deaths by suicide increased because the number of homicides has declined?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think they're sort of 2 separate phenomena. Yeah, so the answer is no, I guess.
There's no correlation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's correlation. You know, suicide rates are impacted by things that are sort of that may also impact homicide rates. But I mean, like I said, you know, the white population is more impacted by suicide as compared to the Black population being more impacted by homicide.
Maybe the question is hinting towards the trauma experienced by the homicides correlated to the suicides that we're encountering. So I definitely understand the question. I'm not sure if the VPC, I'm not sure if you have gone into the correlation between the trauma experience in communities and how that could lead to suicides.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know that we have done much work in that area. I think that there's sort of a lot of fallout from community violence, and suicide may certainly be one of those things. Josh, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, I think the only thing that I would add is that what you see in both homicide and suicide is the driving role played by firearms. You know, the majority of homicides are spurred by guns because they're the most lethal tool available. The completion of a suicide attempt depends on lethality of means employed, and whereas most other means allow for a change of heart or time passes, guns are final when they're utilized in such an attempt. I've never seen much beyond discussion, but I'm not always completely informed regarding the impact of homicide leading to suicide in the context of community or family trauma. But as I said, I think the main issue that is being illustrated here is the role played by firearms, and that overall rates for homicide and suicide track the firearm homicide and suicide rates.
Thanks for that, Josh and Tara. Another question from Kathy. Wondering why, and I think you all can explain this pretty well, wondering why we only have 2023 data. How can we see more recent date numbers? I see that Chicago homicide rates have plummeted in 2025.
Yeah. So first of all, death data take a really long time to finalize for a variety of reasons. And so while more recent death data is available, it's possible that those numbers will change because they're not final, because, death certificates are getting finalized sort of late. And so for the reports that we publish, we really like to use final data sets so that the data are as stable as possible. Yeah, it's a good question.
Another question, lots of great questions in the chat, by the way. Is the firearms so prevalent now? Is it becoming socially accepted to have a gun and use it? What can we do? So are we seeing in the data that it's becoming easier and easier to gain access to firearms?
Yeah, so our report didn't look at like firearm ownership specifically. I think that there are data out there. I don't know if they're specific to Illinois. Josh, or even Yolanda, I don't know if you want to sort of speak to that question. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Well, I would just add that we know that during the pandemic, gun ownership increased in the US. And that also showed a not insignificant increase among communities of color. I think, it's important to remember that still most Americans don't own guns. It's up to about 44%, I believe, of households, the last time I looked at the numbers. And that's been historically the case. Most people don't own guns. Most people have rejected gun ownership, if you look at the real numbers. I think that there's definitely been an increase in acceptance through the marketing of the gun companies, through groups like the NRA, promoting guns for self-defense. And that somehow sort of turns into, no matter what the crisis is, like the pandemic, like natural disasters, there is this hoped for response of the industry. That means you should go buy a gun. But one more point on gun ownership. It's important to remember it's not that every household owns a gun. It's that a very small percentage of Americans own a lot of guns. And the bulk of the guns in American hands are in very few hands. And I think part of the role that groups like One Aim play, and one of the role that we hope our work does, even looking at not just the result of this ownership, of these ownership levels, but the marketing of these guns, is to really show how the industry works to manipulate situations. And really, their bottom line is the bottom line, a little concern for those who actually buy the guns and how they're used.
Good. From Donovan, and folks are saying thank you for answering those questions. From Donovan, do you have any numbers about the amount of guns legally sold in Illinois and if they have increased? Which I think you just kind of talked a little bit about, Josh, already.
We don't have that information. I assume, Yolanda, that information exists to some degree because of the FOID card. Is that correct? I don't know the answer to that question.
Right. I don't have the answers right off. We can follow up via email, but yes, there is. We partner with Brady United, and they do a lot of work on this. In fact, the number of gun manufacturers, they've done a lot of work in kind of making sure they're no longer existent. There's a huge report that you can go on Brady's website, and there's a tool where you can put in your zip code and you can see what gun manufacturers are in your neighborhood, as well as how many infractions they have. Some of them don't report when guns go, mysteriously just like gone from their businesses, and just historically they haven't been held accountable. But with the passing of the Firearm Industry Responsibility Act, as well as with all of this work that our partners are doing to ensure that these rogue gun dealers are held accountable and closed, it is having an impact.
With lots of great questions, we'll take a few more. Do we have any data on causes of violence, like the percentage of domestic violence, percentage of robberies? How specific can the data get?
Yeah, so CDC does collect information in sort of a separate database about violent deaths, so homicides, suicides, etc. And they collect really detailed information about the circumstances surrounding the death. So was the homicide due to intimate partner violence? Was it due to another crime like robbery, as mentioned in the question? So the data the data exists. These data take a really long time to finalize, even longer than like the mortality data that we used in this current report. But the data exists, and it's a really important effort to gather this information to have a better understanding in general about what the circumstances are surrounding these deaths, because I think that gives us a better idea about opportunities for how to prevent future deaths.
Thank you. And the last question, I think one aim will take the bulk of this, but I'm curious about, this is from Elizabeth Fox. I'm curious about the different types of outreach programs, et cetera, in cities of similar makeup of Chicago that have lower gun violence rates. Are there programs we can attempt to replicate in Chicago that could possibly change trajectories? And what role can we play in establishing, promoting, funding such programs? The good thing about the VPC report is it giving us data, and that data is helping us to inform practices. There are lots of other cities and states around the country that are doing phenomenal work to reduce or end gun violence. I also like to just mention there's lots of great solutions here in Chicago of organizations that are doing the work on the ground. Organizations, lots of them are part of our coalition, like what Increase the Peace is doing, like what Mr. Dad's Father's Club, like Hustle Mommies that are supporting survivors. So there are already lots of great organizations that are building out pilots and prototypes designed at reducing gun violence. That being said, we also are here in Illinois, we don't have a monopoly on good ideas legislatively. So we've seen like other states have passed assault weapons bans, and we've used that as blueprints for our own assault weapons bans. Lots of other states have already had like safe storage bills being passed, and we've used some of that in the way we've passed legislation here in Illinois. In short, yes, I think we need to continue to invest in organizations like the ones that are made up in our coalition, and also we need to continue to work collaborative with our states as we pass legislation. So, would anyone else like to jump into that question?
Well, I would just piggyback on that, Robert, by saying, like the work that our CVI partners are doing. Someone mentioned earlier in chat that homicide rates due to firearms is decreasing in 2025, and we can say that's in large due to the fact that we've got groups like Chicago Cred and the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago. Robert already mentioned Increase the Peace. UCAN. There are, even El Rincon now has a wonderful program. So intervening before the violence happens is really important. And Illinois has done a great job and continues to do a great job of, including those who are those trusted liaisons who have lived experience themselves often going into the streets, and risking their own safety to prevent it, right? Because they have a similar background and can talk to folks about making different choices. So there's a lot. I mean, I think this happened last year when we released the report. The statistics can be somewhat, they can be saddening, and that's just the reality. But I'm so grateful that we have this partnership with Violence Policy Center so that we can track the data, because that helps organizations like ours, advocates like you, be able to raise your voices, and talk with your legislators. That's another thing. That's another solution, is talking with your representatives and saying, we want change. Because we know that passing stronger gun violence prevention laws, it plays a role in creating a safer Illinois. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Tara, Josh, any closing words?
For
I
me,
appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I would
Go
just
ahead,
reiterate that we really appreciate the partnership with One Aim Illinois and all the member organizations and advocates who are part of their various coalitions. To us, because we're spending a lot of time crunching numbers all the time, trying to offer, for lack of a better phrase, a foundation for policy, to actually see our work being used by those who are on the ground fighting the good fight in state houses and in their communities is very rewarding to us. We really appreciate the opportunity offered to us by One AIM Illinois and everyone here today and those that they work with throughout the year.
We appreciate your partnership as well, Josh and Tara, and everybody on this call, and even those who aren't on this call, but like I said, came to Springfield, come out to our events, call their legislators. It's one day it will end. I will say that. We've got to believe that in order to keep advocating for peace, and I do. And you're all a part of that mission.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much to the Violence Policy Center. Truly appreciate all the work that you're doing. We're now coming to the close of our coalition meeting, but before we do, I have a couple announcements for everyone. So thank you for staying on. And we'll make sure that we give everyone access to the chat, as well as this meeting is being recorded, and I'll send a follow-up email to everybody. So for everyone still on the call, we would love for you to join One AIM's open mic on June 25th, from 6 to 9 at Wild Blossom Wine and Meadery. Brittany will drop in that Eventbrite link. We'd love for you to come out, celebrate, and just be with us in person. Again, that's going to be an open mic. It's going to be an open mic on June 25th from 6 to 9 at Wild Blossom on the south side of Chicago. We also would like for everyone on the call to know, as Yolanda said at the beginning, that June is Gun Violence Prevention Awareness Month. So we're partnering with a bunch of organizations. We're doing one event per, so the coalition itself is doing one event per day for the entire month of June. To find those events, you can find it at wearorange.org or illinoispeaceproject.org. Again, there are lots of great organizations doing phenomenal work every day, but in particular in June, there's going to be one event per day in honor of Gun Violence Prevention Awareness Month. We also want you to know that we have scheduled our next coalition meeting for July 7th, 2025 from 12 to 1. On this special coalition meeting, we're going to be inviting you, our coalition, to inform the rest of the coalition about the work that you all are doing. So if you would like to have your organization or advocacy efforts showcased on that July 7th, 2025, again from 12 to 1 coalition meeting, please email me at robert@oneaimil.org. We'd love to have your organization be a part of our next coalition meeting. And then we'll also throw in the link to that coalition meeting. And then last but not least, there's an important event. Join Moms Rising and the National Women's Law Center Action Fund for a special community Zoom meeting on Wednesday, June 18th, so this week, from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard to starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. We will hear from leaders in the U.S. Senate, storytellers, and Moms Rising and National Women's Law Center Action Fund leaders at a critical moment ahead of the Senate vote on the extremely harmful Republican bill, the budget bill tax package that blatantly prioritizes billionaires over families. Together, we'll learn about what's at stake, including the billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid and food assistance, and how we can take action to defend these essential programs. So feel free to sign up for the Moms Rising event. And with that being said, I would like to just thank everybody for joining this coalition call. We truly appreciate it. Again, I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone. But without further ado, we'd love to give you back 15 minutes of your day. We appreciate you, and we thank you for all the work you're doing to help end gun violence. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Brittany, you want to get some music up?